I'm Ben Abrahamson from the Alsadiqin Institute. I'm the director of the Alsadiqin Institute. It was founded about 10 years ago. It's a collection of close to 50 scholars, mostly Muslim scholars, Jewish scholars, about history, common history, jurisprudence, and anything between the shared culture of Jews and Muslims. It's mostly devout Muslims and devout Jews. It's taking things from a religious point of view and working, sharing things and seeing where we have touch points of commonality.
Now, you've just completed this paper, Signs of the Hour and the Messiah. A lot of the press are sort of framing what's going on in apocalyptic terms in the Middle East, and obviously with a nuclear-armed Israel, this is potentially true. There could be some sort of, World War III focused around this. But anyway, what was you setting out to do with the Signs of the Hour and the Messiah paper?
In this particular paper, it's a draft of what eventually I'm working into an entire book called The Signs of the Hours, which will be broader scope. But this is particularly talking about the Jewish point of view and explaining how Rabbinic Judaism looks at these signs. A lot of times, particularly in Christian circles, you look at them as if these prophecies, as if there's going to be one fulfillment and it's going to happen on this date and this is exactly what's going to happen. And what I tried to give in the first couple of chapters of the paper was a sort of an overall view that prophecy, Daniel, who talks about the end times more than anybody else, is not even the book of the prophets. He's in the books of the writings. He's together with the other chroniclers. And the reason why is because generally in Judaism, these kinds of prophecies are meant to be instructive. They're supposed to be an analogy, a cycle, a parable that happens to people, and it happens over and over again on a daily cycle, on a weekly cycle, on a family cycle, a community cycle, and it also happens on a worldwide cycle. And indeed, you'll have all these things. You'll have Messiah, you'll have more than one of them, you'll have Antichrist, you'll have a war, you'll have all these kinds of things. And we may even experience them right now, or we could experience them a century from now. But it doesn't take away from the meaning of what this is all trying to tell us, that we're supposed to be prepared, that we're supposed to look for the best, that if we trust in the plan that God has given us, we won't succumb to temptation, we won't fall into these problems. And the biggest message that I try to give is when you talk about all these end times, the war, the Antichrist, the plagues, everything that's going on, the end's going to be good. It's really going to be a good thing. And it's never about theology. Well, this sect's going to fight this sect. It's always about people who want to submit to good and ethical behavior against the people who don't want to submit to good and ethical behavior. And it's not, this political group, not this religious group against this religious group. It's a whole different perspective than that. So I try to give over a feeling of what the rabbinic perspective is on end times eschatology.
We don't know when this is exactly going to unfold. I think that's pretty clear. So maybe we better just put that to one side for a second.
Well, what I'm trying to say is it could unfold right now with Israel and all these things, and it could unfold again in 50 years from now, and it could again in 1,000 years from now. And it doesn't contradict. We believe that prophecy fulfills more than once.
So could you just give us a perspective on Zionism? Because we've got this whole Zionist movement from the 1800s, which is split into political Zionism and religious Zionism. But then we've got in the background, we've got just being Jewish as well. So can you sort of help separate out these various terms? They often get intermingled.
Well, it's also very hard because people, especially when you're talking about on the internet, the word Zionism means so many different things to so many different people, from controlling the press and the world banks down to, to running governments, puppet governments. I mean, I don't even know how you can define it. What I can say that, living in Israel is part of Judaism. If you compare it to Islam has, Mecca, which is called the Qibla, the direction, that's where you pray, and that's, the center of all the holidays and everything. And Judaism has exactly the same thing in the Torah. I mean, the Jerusalem is it is the Qibla. It's exactly like the Mecca, for the people who keep Torah. You pray in that direction. The holidays are there. You're only allowed to do, all the commandments in the Torah are, 90% of them are supposed to be done in the area around that Qibla, that center place, which for us is Jerusalem. So, it's just part of the religion that you should want to live in Israel. And from a religious point of view, when I hear the people who, the anti-Zionists, Satmar, Neturei Karta, this kind of thing, every time I hear that, I remember that the anger that they feel over what happened to the Jewish agency, where they did not spend as much effort saving the Hungarian Jews as other people felt they should have. And the anger is just seething through. It's not because these people who are these black-hatted people who are anti-Zionists love Palestinians so much. It's just that they really hate the Jewish agency. But as far as Zionism in general, from a religious point of view, that started, as far as I know, from the Ottoman Empire. You're back when they kicked Jews out of Spain. The first people to help start settling Jews in the Holy Land were the Ottomans. So this has been going on for a long time. Even in Tiberias, the Jewish people were able to get a firman to have almost a little autonomy area in the city of Tiberia by the Sea of Galilee. So terms are very laden with meaning. And if you ask me about Zionism, I say I don't know about Zionism. What I know about is Jewish people are commanded by God to do commandments, and these commandments apply in the land of Israel.
There is this Amida prayer, which is said in the synagogues, actually said in the homes of devout Jews as well, which has been around for quite a while. This is all about the return to Jerusalem. Hashivenu,
yeah, exactly. Bring us back to the land and rebuild the temple and stuff like that. What people should know, though, that the Jewish idea of rebuilding the temple is very different than the Christian idea. The Christian idea is based on revelations, that if you want all the events in Revelation to happen, they all presuppose that in Jerusalem you'll have a functioning temple with a high priest and sacrifice. A functioning temple. And the easiest way to do that is to have a temple that looked like it did back in Herod's time. But that's not the Jewish point of view. The Jewish point of view is that we were commanded to make sacrifices. We were commanded to, the daily sacrifices, weekly sacrifices, Sabbath sacrifices, these kind of things. Just like, in Islamic, you don't have sacrifices, but you have, what they call qurbani, where you, sacrifice a lamb or a camel or something. And these things this is what we need to do. And the Temple Mount is 1 square kilometer. And there's really no reason why that area couldn't be shared. The current situation is sort of like if you can imagine the Vatican taking over the Mecca and saying, all right, no Muslims allowed. You're not allowed to come here. You can't do pilgrimage here. You can't do your pilgrimage rites here. Nothing. You're forbidden from coming here. That would be a very difficult situation. And in Judaism, it's the same thing. Here is the center point of our religion is forbidden. On the other hand, Judaism is aware that this is a very important place to both Christianity and Islam, which came out of Judaism. So there should be a way to work out to share this, but people don't, they don't usually talk about that. But the truth is, there's absolutely no reason why the Temple Mount couldn't be shared. And in fact, this is I bring down in some of the research that I've been doing, is that Abed Malek, who built the Dome of the Rock, was in a lot of ways following Ezekiel when he built that. He thought at the time he was building Ezekiel's temple. You look at the coins that
the Dome of the Rock is actually supposedly in the way, isn't it, of the rebuilt?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not in the way. The Dome of the Rock is over where the Holy of Holies is. And in Jewish, that's a place, in Jewish tradition, you go there once a year on the high holidays, and that's it. You never go there. The Holy of Holies, that's the Dome of the Rock is the center point for prayer, but it's not the place where the commandments, where the celebrations are, which are done to the right of it. You have the Dome of the Rock, then you have the Dome of the Chain, and then after that you have a very, very large area, and that would be the area where the Jews would be doing things.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that you've got the three Abrahamic faiths have their Sabbath days on different days. So you've got the Jews on a Saturday, the Christians on a Sunday, and the Muslims on a Friday. Maybe you could have the same building, which becomes a centre of prayer on those different days.
Absolutely, but you don't need the building. Like I said, the Temple Mount is 1 square kilometer. It's huge. It's really huge. They play football on it. I mean, it's soccer. The place which is interesting to the Jewish people is there currently is nothing there, and there would be nothing to prevent the Jews to completely fulfill all their dreams and hopes and wishes while leaving everything intact that's there today, without making a single change in what exists today.
Amazing. Well, look, you've just been talking about the temple in Revelation, also about the resumption of Jewish sacrifice. I can see this coming up against Christianity in quite a serious fashion, because at the end of the book of Revelation, it says that there will be no temple in the New Jerusalem. No temple needed, because it will be filled with the glory of God and Christ will be everywhere, but also with the sacrifice. Now, Christ is supposed to be the sacrifice, so no more sacrifices of chickens or any other animals. Jesus has done that job 2,000 years ago.
Well, in the rabbinic point of view, if you read the Torah, God made covenants with many different people. He made a covenant with Adam. He made a covenant with Abraham. He made a covenant with Jacob, with Ishmael, Esau. He made many different covenants. And the whole point of view of rabbinic Judaism is that God made multiple simultaneous covenants with mankind. What we believe is that anyone who believes in one God, who believes in reward and punishment, and does good deeds, in 7 of the 10 commandments, they're on the way to heaven. So as far as the Jews are concerned, we don't have any first-hand information, but if the Muslims are keeping, monotheism, reward and punishment, and doing good things, good deeds, and the Christians are doing the same thing, you guys are believers. You're just like us. You're going to heaven just like we are. And we could envision a kind of federalism. And in fact, this is what the political theorists of the Dutch political theorists back in the 16th century were talking about, is a religious federalism where you have one common Abrahamic faith and then multiple groups on top of that. Each of them can have entirely different ideas. You want to believe that you have one sacrifice. You want to believe you have no sacrifice. That's fine. That's your covenant. Okay, but our covenant is very clear in the Torah that you're supposed to have covenants. It never doesn't say anywhere in the Torah not to have covenants, not to have sacrifices. And Islam has its own way of doing things. And this is and actually, in the Quran they put it very nicely. It says, you should have a race for virtue, that God could have made us one people with one covenant, but he chose not to.
Well, I mean, what you're saying is fascinating, because people of faith, I think, understand that in order for people to come to that faith, it should be done by persuasion and by convincement, rather than by browbeating people and getting angry with them, Ben.
Sure. Well, the whole question, and this really applies to Christianity more than to Islam and Judaism, is do you believe in exclusivism? Do you believe that you are does one group believe that they're the only way? And that's not really fair. I mean, you can believe that, but I mean, to behave that way, it's certainly not very socially friendly. It's not a way of, I mean, if you don't believe that the person next to you is God-fearing, then you have to watch your back all the time. You can never feel safe. You can never feel, that you could trust this guy. You can't, and this is what the message I'm really trying to give in the Alsadiqin Institute, is that we really are Jews, Christians, Muslims, we are all Abrahamic. There is a reason why we should trust each other. We may not have the same covenant, but we do have the same din, the same basic faith. And that's enough that we can build on. It's enough that we can build trust on.
Here's one for you. Talking about fairness from God, what about the Native Americans? What about, so, for example, the Celts in prehistoric England here? I mean, surely God has got a way for them. I mean, otherwise, if they don't have any knowledge of Judaism or the Abrahamic faiths, are they all going to hell?
No,
Or
no.
did they all go to hell?
What Judaism believes is that all the religions originally started out as monotheistic and then fell into idolatry as people anthropomorphized, as they tried to find more physicality in their spiritual belief. But originally, we think that, Hinduism, Buddhism, all these, were originally monotheistic, and even today have a certain way to look at it, that they're monotheistic. So there is a way, even an atheist, or I don't know, but an atheist, agnostic, somebody who says, I don't know about God. God's just some big force out there. Even then, if he's being ethical, if he's believes in that there's justice in the world, and he's keeping the 7 of the 10 commandments and everything that falls from that, he's great too. I mean, there's really no reason why we shouldn't respect. And this is really telling us how to behave with each other. It's not saying, I can tell a Muslim he's going to heaven. It's not my job to do that, or a Christian. They have their own path, their own way to work that out. But what it does telling me, I have to respect them as if they are. I have to respect a Muslim as if he's every bit a good believer as I am. I have to trust him. He gives something, a Muslim who's keeping his religion properly. If he testifies in a court, I have to trust that just as if, my most devout Jewish neighbors said the same thing. I have to trust them.
That sounds a bit like judge not, lest ye be judged.
Judge not. We have to have justice. I mean, if somebody comes to break your window, you have to figure out what to do about it.
Listen, you said something very interesting just now. I sort of skipped over it, which is about multiple messiahs. Now,
yes.
Obviously, Christians are kind of have it rather easy, having had their messiah. But Jews are kind of looking at their wristwatch, aren't they? When is he coming? So what about this idea of multiple messiahs? And if you can clear that one up for me.
In the Torah, the word Messiah is used several times for several different people. It's used for David. It's used for high priest. Cyrus, who was a non-Jewish king of Babylon, he was called a Messiah. I mean, Messiah in Judaism is a title, like prophet. A prophet is somebody who speaks what God tells him to speak. A Messiah is somebody who does what God tells him to do. And we believe that there will be different Messiahs. There's, if you look in the Talmud, it very clearly talks about the Messiah of David and a Messiah of Joseph. Messiah of David will be like King David. He's going to be a king. He's going to rule and bring the knowledge of God and peace to the world and all that. And then the Messiah of Joseph will be like Joseph. He's going to be sold by his brothers. He'll disappear for a while. And then at the proper time, he'll even look like he's opposing his brothers, opposing the Jewish people. But at the last minute, he's going to say, I'm Joseph. I'm your brother. I'm here to help you. And at the last, there'll be a reconciliation. That's what the Messiah of Joseph. So there's a lot of, overlap here and a lot of, touch points where Christianity and Judaism have common points. Same with Judaism and Islam, and the whole way around. And people are very quick to judge, to set up walls and say, I'm on the good side, you're over the fence, you're the bad guy, and they're not realizing we're all talking about the same stuff.
But what about because we're trying to focus on this paper, The Signs of the Hour and the Messiah. Right. Do you think that there will be sort of counter messiahs to come in the future in the end times?
Well, in Judaism, there's a thing called Armilus, which is it means the Roman, or it means the devourer of nations. Yeah, I mean, it basically any time you have you try to overcome sin, there's going to be an evil force against you. So on a worldwide scale, if you want to set up a kingdom like the ideal version of King David, some rightly guided ruler who will come and insist on justice, if we're going to get there, there's going to be some down points, some low points before we get there, and there's going to be oppositions and fakers are going to come in. And this is the idea of the Antichrist, or the Dajjal. And you see this in the Torah. You had a person called Billum, who was basically the opposite of antithesis of Moses. Moses was gathering the people together to launch them to the children, to the Holy Land. And Billum was there saying, forget your mission. Let's all just mingle in together, become one nation, and everything's permitted. So they were very much opposites. So, either in the desert or on a personal scale when you're overcoming sin, or on a worldwide scale, there will be, people who oppose this. Actually, if you, well, okay, do you have any questions on that?
I mean, I'd just like you to give us your perspective from a Jewish point of view as to how this battle between good and evil might play out. I mean, it's clearly at some point going to come to a head.
Well, it's the same way it played out in the desert, where Moses took the children of Israel. First of all, Moses was rejected by the children of Israel at the beginning. There were two, Datan and Abiram, said, hey, who gave you power to judge over us? The first thing we're going to see is the leader is going to be rejected. He's going to disappear for a while, like Moses went off to Midian. Then he's going to come back with signs and wonders. And, in Jewish tradition and also in Islamic tradition, there's a lot of things that talk about the 10 signs of the hour. There are 10 particular plagues. We talk about on Passover, there will be blood and fire and pillars of smoke. And one of the big signs in Islam in the end of days is smoke coming up, like in Los Angeles, things burning like that. This is the plagues, and then you have the Amalekites come and declare war on Israel, and then they try to wipe out Israel militarily, and then that doesn't succeed. So we have this guy called Billum who tries to use an ideological fight against them, and they overcome that, and then they go into the Holy Land. And the idea is that, when you're talking about believers here, from a Jewish point of view, that doesn't mean just, people born Jewish. That means everybody who believes in, one God, word and punishment, and keeps the 7 commandments. They're all included in the same side here. We're all going to be redeemed together.
Now, a lot of people looking at what's been going on in Gaza, seeing the horrific toll that it's taken on, particularly on innocent women and children, but also, of course, medical workers, journalists, but are pointing to the current political rulers of Israel, the far-right bloc, many of whom declare their adherence to the Torah, and they're saying they're raising hell in the Holy Land.
Well, I haven't heard that.
Well, maybe it's not many, but it certainly looks like that, doesn't it? I mean, this is the Holy Land, and there are lots and lots of innocent people dying, or there have been anyway up until the weekend.
There's lots of innocent people dying in Sudan. There's lots of innocent people dying whatever, and a bunch of different places there now. I mean, what's going on in Sudan is absolutely horrendous. But people are talking about it. I mean, I think one of the things I try to say in the signs of the hour, in fact, the quote that I ended up on, there's a wonderful hadith, Islamic hadith that talks about the end times. And it just says it beautifully. It says, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari says, may Allah be pleased with him, said the Prophet informed us that towards the end of times there will be harj. Harj is like the Hebrew word harag, which means to kill. And I asked, what is harag? And the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, deceit and killings. And he said, even more than now? He says the difference at the end of times, it won't be the unbelievers killing you, rather you'll be killing each other. He said the intellects of the general masses at that times will be deceived, and they'll be following fools who have no intellects themselves. They'll be assuming they have a legitimate cause, but they will have no legitimate cause. In other words, what you'll have is a bunch of ideologies declaring each other to be the worst possible subhuman thing that comes into the earth. I mean, you saw this, during the Cold War. This is what the Russians said about the Americans.
Well, it sounds like party politics to me.
Ukrainians and Russians. I mean, everybody likes to make the other side subhuman. And, and we see this in Gaza too. I mean, there's so much more interest going on in Gaza than there's many more displaced people I mean, even, many more displaced people, many more people getting killed in many other areas. But why is it so concerning on Gaza? Because it's hitting an ideological note. And it really, if we could come to the point where we're on the same side, I mean, why is there fighting? There's fighting because there's no justice. Why is there no justice? It's because there's no courts that both sides believe in. Why are there no courts? It's because both sides thinks the other one's an unbeliever, a kafir, somebody can't be trusted. And that's what's got to stop. We got to put everybody on the same side of the fence, set up proper courts, get real justice, and solve these problems the way they should be solved and not with guns and bombs.
Yeah, well, so also I think it's useful to take for people who aren't familiar with this through some of the terminology, for example, through the difference between the Talmud, the Torah, the Tanakh, for people that haven't studied Judaism. And also, of course, there are supposed to be different versions of the Talmud. So Jerusalem Talmud, Babylonian Talmud. Can you just give us an idea of how important, what provenance these various terms have and what they mean?
What we believe, Rabbinic Judaism believes that when Moses went up to Sinai to get the Torah from God didn't give him a printed book from Amazon and said, here, figure this out. We believe that he was given the words of the Torah, and also the meaning at the same time. He not only saw the black and white words, or in that case, that was inscribed on stone, but he also knew exactly how to apply them. Moses was given that understanding. And what happened was, over the years, that needed to be expounded upon. So you had more prophets, Jeremiah, Isaiah, who clarified more points. And then eventually you had, people who were sages, people who lived righteous lives, and they wrote down examples of this understanding. And this is what became called the Mishnah, or what they call hadith in Islam. These are records that people remember of what the Bible meant in a certain situation. And what the Talmud is you take those core teachings together, core examples, and you put it together with a code of Jewish law. How does this apply to business? How does this apply to your daily life? And so the Talmud is basically a bunch of examples of what righteous people heard and remember going all the way back to Sinai. But it itself is not the important thing. The important thing is the understanding that you get from studying the Talmud. The Talmud has to bring you to the proper understanding of the Torah, of what Moses was given. Ideally, you want to come the same understanding that Moses had, so that when a new situation arises, you would do it in the same way. So that's why people say the Talmud's important. Well, of course it's important, because you have to understand the Torah. But it's not inspired. It's not an inspired book. It's a tool to allow you to gain the proper understanding of Torah. So the Tanakh is many of these other, other prophets. And then you have the Talmud. You had one Talmud that, was written in Jerusalem and another in Babylon. And they were the same for many years. But with all the, war that was going on between the Romans and the Persians, completely trashed the academies in Jerusalem, in Tiberias, and they had to close that Talmud. They stopped working on it. And the Babylonian Talmud was able to go on another 200 years, so it's got a little more material to it. It's basically the same, but it's got a little extra there. So did that answer your question?
Yeah. Finally, I wonder if you can say, because there's a lot of people suggesting that the regime now under Netanyahu doesn't really represent Judaism, and that much of what's happened since the Zionist movement and Herzl began is man's work, not God's work, and that potentially this has to be overthrown, and those overthrowing this and installing proper morals straight from the Ten Commandments, those people are actually doing God's work by actually installing a proper kingdom. And in a way, Netanyahu and his political people in Jerusalem at the moment are a kind of provocation which will provoke something happening. In fact, I remember chatting to somebody a couple of weeks ago who was saying that Netanyahu's father tried to imbibe him with the idea that he was the king to come that was prophesied in the 12th century by Maimonides, that he had to provoke and he had to create the situation whereby the Jewish Messiah would come. Now that obviously is
that's not a nice idea.
I wonder what you make of some of these ideas, Ben.
Well, I mean, there's no concept of, we don't have a book of Revelation. We don't have a book that says you do X, Y, Z, the Messiah's going to come. There's nothing for us to push on. It says that the thing that's causing the Messiah not to come is baseless hatred, hating people for no cause.
So what do you make of Maimonides then from the 12th century?
Yeah. What's the question?
What do you make of these prophecies from Maimonides? Well, I mean, it's he didn't a rabbi in Egypt, wasn't he?
He just said that if one of the commandments in Torah is that there should be a Jewish king, and the king has certain things he has to do. One of them is, help bring all the Jewish people, under his into his kingdom, into his area, to restart the temple sacrifices, and to what do you call it? There was a third thing also. But it's not this kind of the Messiah, particularly according to the Rambam, is not at all like the Christian Messiah, where you're talking about somebody who's going to magically change the world into a completely different place. The Rambam says at the end of times, that you have the prophecy from Isaiah that the lion and the lamb and the little child will all be together. He said there'll still be lions. There'll still be lambs. In the time of the Messianic era, there's still going to be lions. There's still going to be little children. There's still going to be all these things are going to still exist. The difference between the Messianic era and our current era is how we relate to each other.
Okay, I said finally, but another question is sort of provoked there. Okay. Do you think that Netanyahu is, and the current leadership in Israel is doing the right thing by really, bringing about, I suppose, a moral disgust? A lot of people around the world are looking at what's been going on with these military weapons designed to attack armies being used on civilians, and saying, well, actually, what he's doing is discrediting the faith rather than pushing forward God's agenda.
Well, all I can say is that 99.99% of the people who live in Israel don't think that, including the Palestinians that live inside of Israel.
Okay, can you articulate that? Why not?
Because it's from somebody who lives here. It's very clear that what Netanyahu has been doing is keeping the country afloat, keeping it, still around. I don't know any other country that's had 100 ballistic missiles thrown at it, and we're still here to talk about it. I was actually quite impressed. I didn't even know that Israel had such anti-missile weapons. Or there was, when the whole thing started, when you had, 3,000 people, take over the entire south of the country, and, hundreds of Israeli soldiers were getting killed. Israel has no interest in any land outside of its history, what applies to its history, something historically significant. Israel's not interested in Syria. It's not interested in Lebanon. It's not interested in all these places. Its only interest is to survive. And, maybe it's going with a big hand, heavy hand, and I don't know enough. That's not my field. I can't comment on that. But, I would say that the current government has nationalists in it, very radical nationalists. And to me, they strike very much like, some of the jihadists I hear in Egypt and, in Turkey and stuff. They're saying the same things, just with a different, tone, a different context. People say that the Christian Zionists are pushing towards, bringing about another war. Well, I see, Islamic jihadists pushing for, the end times war and the same. The manifesto that Hamas made when they invaded didn't say anything about the persecution or the difficulties of the Palestinian people. It was all about how the Jewish people were raising red cows for their sacrifices and how they have to be stopped and how they have to not return to Israel. To return according to their particular interpretation, returning to Israel itself is against the Quran. If you return, that God's going to punish them if they try to return.
Well, how about the Old Testament? How about the Torah, the Tanakh? Does that really talk about man coming back there, or is this something that should be facilitated by God? Because the Zionist movement was clearly, it was started by secular Jews, for goodness sake. It's not.
Well, like I said, as far as I know, the Zionist movement started with the Ottoman Empire, but the Torah absolutely believes that all Jews should live in Israel. That's a fundamental concept there.
Okay, can you just let our viewers?
It doesn't believe exclusive state like a European colonial sense that you have solid borders and you only allow your type in. That's not at all. I mean, Zephaniah says, that, the prophets say that the Jerusalem has to be a house of prayer for all people. I mean,
wouldn't it be better for Israel to be ruled by people who believe that?
Well, the religions that I belong to, the Al-Quds Israel, the religious who participate in the government believe that by, getting the message across and by getting these people to return to their roots, that it can come to that result.
Do you ever feel, as a Zionist yourself, do you ever feel that... I don't like
the term.
No? You don't like the term, but you do believe in the return of the Jews to Jerusalem and to the Holy Land. But as someone that does believe that, do you ever feel sort of caught between a rock and a hard place where you've got much of the world calling out Zionism and saying that is the problem, where actually you've also got your pro-Netanyahu exclusivity people in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv calling you out too? So it's almost as if you're rather friendless taking that position.
Well, I believe people have to do what's right. And I think that one of the biggest things that we're facing nowadays is a complete breakdown of credibility, of authority, of understanding who's giving us the right story. That's completely breaking down. We see the trust in the news system is going way down. And I think we need to rebuild confidence and get some, righteous leaders up there to patch it all up. I mean, if you think about the leader of Christianity, Jesus, and the leader of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him, and Moses, and you put them all in a room, they would certainly not be fighting each other like we're fighting. I mean, something's going wrong here.
Well, let's hope that changes. The sooner the better. So whereabouts can people find you, Ben, and get hold of your paper, this paper we're discussing, The Signs of the Times and the Messiah by Ben Abrahamson, January 2025. How do people follow you on social media, etc.?
Well, you can find my books on Amazon, either Alsadiqin Press, that's Alsadiqin Press, or Ben Abrahamson, or that's the books. The Signs of the Hour is a shorter article I put on academia.edu. If you look for Ben Abrahamson, you'll find the paper there along with other papers. You can do Google and YouTube. You can look at discussions I've had in Hyde Park. I had a very nice discussion. It got like a million views of, whatever. And, getting in touch with me directly. The best way is on Facebook, because before I write books, before I, try to present any new ideas, or even, the other scholars I work with are also presenting ideas as well, I float them on Facebook, on my Facebook page at Facebook, Ben613.
What about, in a word, do you think there are some prospects for peace in the Middle East now?
I'm absolutely confident of it. Absolutely believe it. Yep.
Okay,
but I think it comes with a fundamental change. It's fundamental. We've got to believe we're on the same side of the fence. We've got to stop seeing each other as competitors.
Othering people. This is really, the problem, isn't it? And we have to also include the Satanists in that. We mustn't other them either. Everyone is redeemable. This is one of the messages I think.
And everybody's got an evil inclination too. I mean, I personally don't go so much for believing there's a cabal of people pulling strings somewhere. I think people are just evil enough to cause their own problems.
Okay, Ben Abrahamson, thanks very much for joining us.
Okay, nice talking to you.